packed room here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Saba. I am the CEO of Designing Schools, and I'm so excited to be here today to moderate this incredible panel of people around a very complex topic that we're apparently going to tackle in 40 minutes. And so I'm really excited you'll get a nice high-level overview. One of the things we would like to put on your radar is if you have any questions that you would like to ask of the audience, we are going to have time for Q&A. And so that's really where I always say the magic happens. So if you have any questions, this is an amazing, very diverse audience of people. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves as they frame the different questions to sort of allow us to have a foundational kind of shared understanding of this topic and where it is that we would like to go. So billions of dollars have been invested over the past couple of decades in so many different technology initiatives across education. And when we look at sort of the results, as you shared, we don't really always see the correlation, not even from sort of like a testing perspective, but even from a social perspective, from a human perspective, really feeling the promise that technology has always offered. And so what do you think, Aaron, I'm going to hand it to you first, is going to be different this time with AI when we think about equity and access and the promise of what's possible?
Thank you for that, and good morning, everybody. My name is Megiddo. I'm not an educator. I'm on the technology side. I've been doing ed tech for many years. I did startups in math education back in the 90s and spent over 20 years at Microsoft, including 10 leading the education efforts globally for K through 12 and higher ed efforts that Microsoft does around. And I started, we talked about this earlier. I used to start all my presentations to school leaders, country leaders, district leaders, university leaders with two slides. One showing the investment in their country or in their school or in their state in technology. And that was a graph that was, started at the left and went up and to the right steeply in millions or billions of dollars. And the next graph would be graduation rates. The next graph would be standardized testing or any sort of impact. And those are flat when you look at it in aggregate. So, is it different this time with AI is a great question. And to me, it always comes back to it has nothing to do with the technology. It has everything to do with how you implement it and what the people using the technology do. If a teacher handed out assignments to their high school students or college students on a Monday, and then the students turned them in on Wednesday, the teacher graded them over the weekend, and then sent them back to the students, the next following Monday, at that point the students are in the next class learning the next subject around the curriculum and not really looking at any of the feedback, and no learning from that assignment happened. Whether those students did that on a piece of paper, a digital tablet with ink, Google Docs in the cloud, or the teacher graded it with AI, if that process doesn't change, if how the teaching and learning doesn't change in adoption technology, the outcomes are not going to be different. And I think the big question today for me as we look at the promise of AI is how do we change how we teach and how we learn and the fundamental structures that govern that? The technology alone is not going to make a difference.
And we know that, so many educators and people on the front lines kind of responsible for really making that shift have a variety of different challenges that they deal with every single day. And, we sort of say like AI is like this uninvited dinner guest that's just arrived to really, kind of bring in even more havoc. But I think one of the other really big challenges is there's not a lot of access even to these tools. Like I think this is one of the first times we've seen technology move at a much faster pace and people's adoption of that technology move at a faster pace than perhaps previous ones, where it's not necessarily always ready for that enterprise setting. So we're going to go over here to Dr. Pahiri from Digital Promise to talk to us a little bit about, given the complexity of integrating AI from all the different elements that it brings in, and then hearing we have to also change how we teach and learn, so we have these multiple layers. What kind of support and resources do you think are going to be needed as we think about being able to scale access and equality across schools?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Saba, and it's a pleasure speaking with this panel here today, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I am Deblina Bakira, and I'm from Digital Promise. My work focuses on research practice partnerships, and in my, I say the past life, it's not a past life though, but I've been a science classroom educator. So I'm gonna build in the resources and strategies that we need. There are several, right? We have been speaking about it throughout the air show, throughout the summit, But I'm going to highlight a few just from my perspective, and especially thinking more about the educator perspective and the student lens. One thing that we need to think about really is, as a tech developer, are we really centering our humans or our learners or not? The reason I'm asking this question to this room is because it's very, very important to center humans in the loop. And what I mean by that is, yes, we are thinking about integrating human beings and asking them for feedback at just periodically, but are we really thinking about, yes, let's make a conception of this idea with the humans in the loop, with the educators, with the community members, with the parents, with the learners. They are the center who will actually really think about their challenges, their context, their environments, which we do not address, then we are not able to really create a solution for them. Are we thinking about all these different stakeholders when we are creating a product? Can we ensure, moving forward, that we are actually thinking about them from the conception to the end of the product cycle and continuous improvement? Because that is also important. It's not a one and done. We need to keep on thinking about how we can improve our product and make it relevant for our learners as time passes by. And that's how it will be more equitable. The next point I want to talk about is to the district leaders. Because yes, a lot of time there is bureaucracy, there is top-down decision-making, and in the process, our learners and educators are left behind. Can we ensure that they are also in the loop, the community is also in the loop, the parents who are decision makers for these learners outside of the classroom context and also inside of the classroom context, they are in the loop and ensure there are these AI policies and practices, or when they're implemented in the classroom, they get a voice. And it's just not the voice, it's also the decision-making power. Because yes, we can say, you have a voice, we'll hear you out, but then, no, we're not going to implement this because this is not relevant to us, right? That's not what we want. We want to decentralize the power dynamics in all the different stakeholders and ensure that we center our humans and our learners. That's the first point I would like to highlight. The other thing that I really want to talk about is the training. That all these different community members, including parents, learners, educators, that they need to ensure that they have a very good understanding of the AI tools and systems that are being integrated into the classroom and also outside of the classroom. Like I said, all these different key stakeholders are part of the decision-making process, but if we do not understand the bias or the limitation of a tool, how are they supposed to make a very informed choice of what they should be doing and how they can negate those issues and actually move forward and ensure that the learners are really learning the content that they're supposed to, and we create the workforce for tomorrow. I'm touching upon a lot of points here. And the last but not the least, one thing that I would like to talk about is how can we ensure that when we are thinking about, I'm going to give you a really good example here because this is from my personal experience, and how we should ensure when we are talking about equality and access, how are these products are really accessible to all our learners without their backgrounds and without anything that are different variables in their context. We should ensure that everybody should have equal access to the products. But is that happening in today's day and age? Are we creating those or building those products, creating like everyone in mind? But also the thing is, can we really create a content for all? Can we create an AI tool for everyone? That is the question that we need to think about, because the answer potentially is no. It needs to be more targeted to a certain audience or certain learner group, and maybe this is not for everyone. So I'll give you a quick example to just build on top of the story that I just shared, because I was like I said, I was a classroom teacher, and I was a chemistry classroom teacher, so I got to meet with a lot of others in mathematics as well as science classroom teachers, and they mentioned that it was like there were two different contexts. So one is a rural lower income group that I worked with, and then there was also the more affluent urban group that I worked with. And they had the same tool in their classroom, but the way they were integrating that in the classroom was very, very different. The reason being, the educators did not have the same resources or training on how to implement it in the classroom. And when the developers were thinking about building the tool, they were not really thinking about universal design for learning or more accessible learning designs, which basically serve neurodivergent students. So and the bottom line is, a lot of times students did not feel like it was relevant to their context or their environment. And bias is just not for gender or race. We have to remember that bias can also be created because of the context and the environment it's coming from. So given all these pointers, I feel like, yes, I am kind of skeptically optimist about our future on how we want to implement these AI tools into our classrooms and outside of it. But we also have to think about the learners and really, really ensure that they have the power, which ensures that, they are the final decision makers. But it's a big take, though, and a big ask.
Absolutely. So I'm going to, as teachers often do, I'm going to switch this up a little bit based on like those conversations with Dia. I'm going to come to you in a second, but I am just based off of what you said about optimism and like just kind of getting a feel for how people in the room feel. We'd love to see, like, raise your hand if you're like, I'm cautiously optimistic that this time we can get it right. Okay, I got scared there for a moment. No one's raising their hand. How about like, nope, we've got a ton of barriers and we like really need to think through a lot of things before we're gonna get anywhere. Yeah. Okay, amazing. So definitely keep these coming and come back in mind. But one of the things that you said when you speak about that discrepancy between how things are implemented in different areas, and then also you talking about, investments that are being put in and not seeing the outcomes, it always reminds me, and this is somebody I reference a lot lately, and that's Paul Atwell, all the way back in 2001, who talked about the fact that we don't just have a digital divide, we have a digital use divide. Whereas, it's not enough to just put technology in the hands of kids. We have to look at the kinds of problems they're solving, how we're teaching. So this is a 2-decade-old conversation that reemerges every time we have a new technology. So Dia, I want to be able to come over to you because I know you really have thought a lot about the different barriers it is that we are up against. What are the ones that you think, there's many, as like we have like a list here that I can't even remember, but what are the ones that you feel we really need to prioritize if we're going to be able to get it right this time?
So I'm Dia Nguyen, and I work for Amazon Web Services. I've had the opportunity to work with, over 200 or so different companies over the course of the last several years, in particular focused on responsible AI, the ways in which we build and implement AI technology with the consideration for ensuring that we're minimizing the risk, unintended impact, and maximizing benefit. And oftentimes that benefit is considered the benefit to the company, but we also are working with them to elevate that benefit not just to the company, but their customers and ultimately to society. Of course, the company can't benefit if their customers aren't actually being served. Now, there have been a number of things already mentioned, as you said, about like the kind of barriers and challenges that we have. First, we're talking about the adjustments that are necessary for educators to be able to take value or benefit from the technology that is now available to them. And in the other, we heard a little bit about like questions of equity and access. And I think for me, when I think about like equity and access, that is a huge barrier. So some of the things that we often talk about when we think about the ways in which we're going to implement technology is not just in the design. And I won't mention like the things that we need to pay attention to from a design perspective, but you heard it already, that inclusion has to be a priority from design. Right? That we can't think about that as an afterthought. We have to think about it from the design perspective. But then the next piece of this is, what does it look like when we actually implement these things, right? So responsible AI or building ethically and building the kind of technology that's going to engender trust and actually have the outcomes that we want for our learners means that we also need to be thinking about what does that look like in implementation, what does that look like in delivery as we deploy these in schools, in other educational institutions or environments. And so this question of access is a big one, right? Accessibility, and that's not just like what we do in order to ensure that different learners perhaps have the right kind of tooling, but it's also like, what do we do to make sure that people have the technology and have benefit from that? So I go back to thinking about this in the context of COVID. And we know when we brought everybody into their homes for schools, people assumed that everyone was going to be able to get on the internet and just take internet class. And then we had these huge programs with which we had to now try to figure out, like, how do we provide access in the way of technology, Chromebooks, et cetera, so that people can actually take class. And then there was this whole other issue about access to internet. That we still have tens of millions of people around the world that do not have access to internet. So when we think about this, and we were just saying this earlier, some of these problems are not new problems to solve, right? We've been talking about that as we look at every technological sort of advancement, but we actually have to pay attention to that because AI is creating a greater divide, greater than what we've seen with the internet. And so what do we do for access, right? Making sure that we have access to internet, making sure we have access to the tools and technology. From an AWS perspective, we often talk about this in the context of democratizing AI, right? Putting AI in the hands of everyone. But that also means that we have to put AI education in the hands of everyone so that the teachers have better context for understanding the ways in which they now have to integrate it. I make this joke often, but my parents, my family were educators. And my mom became a teacher because she didn't like math and science and technology. And now we're expecting educators to be technologists as well. And so that requires additional diligence and intentionality for them to be able to provide the resources necessary for the students that we now want to benefit, right? And this goes back to your, how do we adjust, or how do we make the necessary adjustments so that everyone can benefit, so that everyone have access? We're doing some work in this particular space from the AWS perspective, and we're providing free education to educators, in particular focused on those that are in underserved communities, so that they have better skills, understanding, awareness, and there's curriculum and content that's even being provided to help them upskill, right, and be retooled in a way to be able to provide education to their students. And then for the students, we also have to think about, like, what do we do in the way of preparing them? And so we have like a scholarship program and other things specifically focused, again, targeted towards underserved and underrepresented, because we know that usually when we start deploying technology, what schools get those? You know, those that are in private schools or better funded, communities, and not those in others. And so when we think about access and sort of the equality that's necessary, then that means that we have to actually build additional programming and focus to be able to reach those in ways that we haven't always intended to do in the beginning.
Absolutely. And Nikki, I'm going to come to you in just a moment, but I think one aspect that you highlight that I think is so important for us to consider is that community education aspect, like not just AI literacy for students or for educators, but for parents, for businesses. And it really is a beautiful moment. We've experienced this a lot in our work is, sometimes the school is the heart and soul of the community, bringing people together to put this on everyone's radar. We have a lot of times where we go to events and we'll do something for a school, and like there'll be business communities there, and they'll be like, oh, we had no idea. Like, oh my God, we need to be doing this as well. So it really is an opportunity for the school to, again, really kind of reclaim its role as that heart and center of the community, really being a place to upskill and really think collectively from all these different lenses, like what's happening, what are you seeing? And the other point that I just wanted to highlight off of what you were saying is as well, there are so many adults around us that don't have access to these tools. Like, I feel like I had to create a whole new budget for my AI tools and all the ones I'm going to, just to be able to experiment with and just to be able to get a feel for, okay, what is here? Not because we should have to buy and purchase every single tool, but at the end of the day, if we're going to be able to make those kinds of informed choices about what we should and shouldn't be using, having an understanding about what exists, what it does is so important. And I still walk into rooms where people barely have touched ChatGPT 4 and think that's just about writing an email. And it's like, oh my God, so much more than that. But Nikki, the biggest barrier that so many people will mention is assessment. And we know it is a trigger word for everybody. Yes, we would love to do that, but assessment needs to, this and this needs to happen first. And when we think about really the root word assessment, right, its roots of where it comes from, the Latin word assidere, which really means to just learn side by side, which is such a beautiful term, right? It's a beautiful vision for like what assessment truly should be. How might AI really help us kind of break free of that, traditional narrative and really go back to sort of the roots of what assessment is supposed to be about in that learning side by side?
Well, hi. So yes, my name is Nikki Etchell, and I am the Chief Assessment Officer for Prometric. I am on now my 30th year in the assessment industry, so I am well aware that assessment is a trigger word for most people. Across every industry, by the way, in market, not just K-12. I think it's particularly unique in K-12 because of the goals and the desires in K-12. And when I think about how AI is going to allow us to evolve that, I really think about it in the, what we assess, when we assess, and how we assess. And I do think, as somebody who really appreciates assessment, I also appreciate when it's not used in the right way and it's not helpful to the ongoing support and equitable access to education and opportunities, then of course it's a trigger word. And I think traditionally, from an assessment standpoint in K-12, when we think about what we've assessed, in assessment, it's always about knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's what the KSAs is what assessment people talk about. In K-12, traditionally, however, what's been focused on is knowledge, right? Skills and abilities aren't necessarily a specific focus or haven't been well included in considering a holistic view of student proficiency, student learning. And so when we think about the what, one of the things that AI tools allows us to do now differently than we were able to do before is open up the capability to better, more efficiently, more effectively assess the skills and abilities in a more authentic way, in a more holistic way. So as we think about now, there's VR options to do assessments in relationship to things like communication and leadership and problem solving, critical thinking. There's different types of skills-based live labs that you can do. There's game-based assessments where you can understand how students are learning and performing as they go. There's tools that allow you to catalog, right, different types of content and create content and assessments in a different way, again, than we traditionally have, that really drives into those skills and abilities. So when we think about the what, it actually provides us an opportunity to have a more holistic and accurate and authentic view of student performance and student learning, which actually the more you can get a holistic view and understand that learners, as we all know, have different approaches to learning, they have different ways of demonstrating their proficiency, then you get more equitable, more fair results, more authentic results about students. So when we think about the what, AI is really helping us in that regard. If we think about the when, right, this is the side-by-side component that we're talking about. There's always, assessment in K-12, and I'm sure people would say lots of assessment in K-12. Some of it is one-time, big bang, do or die, get that good score, don't get that good score, which we can reflect, as we all know, unfortunately, on a student, on a teacher, on a school. And that isn't, from an assessment standpoint, we don't like singular points of data. One do or die point of data is not our favorite either. And so the thinking through the when is really important. We can shift away from the one-time evaluation of proficiency. I wouldn't want somebody to judge my proficiency at my job based on one meeting, one day, one thing, because maybe I wasn't on that day, right? And I don't know if anybody else would want to be evaluated that way, but I certainly wouldn't. And so having that capability to utilize tools that allow us to more authentically and naturally sort of understand student proficiency levels, where they're doing really well, where their skill levels are, when they're performing tasks naturally in their day, in kind of that throughput assessment way, is really going to shift and allow us to think about that differently, and again, allow students to have a much different opportunity and different pathways to show that proficiency as we think about the when. So if we think about the what, we think about the when. I also think about the how, right? We're getting more opportunity with AI tools to assess differently, right? It's not just a multiple choice exam, whether that's on paper, whether it's on a computer. It's thinking through, again, those technology enhanced items, it's gamified assessment, it's simulation, it's skills-based assessments and different live labs. All of those things provide us a capability, again, to have variation in the way students can demonstrate their proficiency, how they get feedback and learn more authentically, and then what pathways we can provide to them for success. So as we think about the what, when, and how. I get very encouraged about that. But I do think, along with everybody else, as we think about how we do that well, as we utilize those tools, I agree with everybody in the thinking through and educating sort of on the use of the tools. I think it's also critical that we educate down to the student, right? As students are interacting inside the classroom, outside the classroom with such a wide variety of AI tools, educating them in how to evaluate the use of a tool, how to contribute to the feedback in the tool itself. Most tools, as you work with it, right, it's learning as it goes. So if you engage in certain ways, it's going to help it. You can also identify and mitigate bias as you see it. So we talk about educating stakeholders, we talk about educating designers and users of tools, and we certainly need to educate down to the student. And I think all of those things, to me, gives me optimism that assessment can stop being a trigger word and can start really being something that is seen as authentic and helpful to provide more and more opportunity for the widest possible set of students across the different ways that they excel.
And I think that's so beautiful, right? Because there is that celebration and that growth of learning. And I also am somebody who's deeply optimistic because I think I also want to really acknowledge that this work is already happening, right? I mean, I'm sure there's many of you in here, but I do want to highlight two groups in particular that are actually doing this work where now we can go and take those AI tools and really accelerate what's even possible. But like we have this table over here with Design 39. Like, so I want to just highlight an example from like each side of the coast, but like Design 39, you want to raise your hand just a little bit so people can come find you after. And Whitney over at Milliola and like at the East Coast, you know, with the badge books. Like this is work that is already happening. Anybody else in here, like, yes, we are redesigning assessments and we are also moving, whether it's competency-based or looking at other models. I think it's, yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, this whole table. And over here as well. So I think it's just so important to highlight that, like, identifying where the work is happening, how are people already doing this, and how does AI become an opportunity to accelerate this work and be able to scale it so that we can really get to that democratizing all of these types of experiences, which brings us to Vic, who's going to give us a bit of a prediction into the future. Like, you've heard all of these challenges, you've heard the barriers, but you've also, yeah, no pressure, but you've also heard, like, you know, this beautiful vision, like there's people who are doing this work, and, you know, we've got a room of people who are, like, you know, cautiously optimistic about what's possible. Do you think this is going to be a threat to our existing system, or is this really going to be an opportunity? What is going to be that differentiating factor between the two?
Whew. Hi, everybody. I'm Vic Vucic. I'm at the Gates Foundation. I focus on AI. I'm an advisor to the president there and work across their programs. And I actually was previously at Digital Promise for many years and launched a big initiative called the Learner Variability Project. So it's great to be here. And so thinking about, like, I mean, I think, you know, AI provides an incredible opportunity. I do think it is groundbreaking, and I've been through many hype cycles. I moved to Silicon Valley in 1998. I've been through booms, busts, over and over, and I've seen them rinse and repeat. And you know what? We're probably going to go through a boom. There's going to be a hype cycle. It's probably going to fall, and then it'll continue to change everything over time, just like the internet, you know, kind of did in its own ways. And AI just applies to so many things, and the fact that it's generative, it really just creates whole new ways of approaching learning. And I was actually just out of breakfast this morning with Dan Schwartz, who's the dean at Stanford. And you know, his one thing that he highlighted was a big shift that needs to happen but can happen is that generative part where learners learning by creating. Because if you think about it, you know, a learner, whether they're in coal country in West Virginia or in urban Chicago, you give them a math worksheet, they don't see themselves in that. Even my son is like, why am I doing this, right? But if you give them tools to say, hey, create an experience around this mathematical concept, or create a simulation, or create something that represents your understanding in this, then they create something that they can actually see themselves in, and that actually carries a part of themselves that builds confidence, pride, and your ability to really become what I think is really important is a strong self-directed learner. Because outside of schools, actually, and inside of schools, there are more opportunities. There's more learning happening in the world today by thousands of orders of magnitude than ever before, right? There's like 1 billion hours of learning videos watched on YouTube every single day, right? And so the opportunities are there, but we have to develop and shift how we teach and learn so that learners are confident, they can understand how these tools work, how they can bring them together to make meaning, how do they partner with others and collaborate and find mentors. Like, that's really where there's a critical piece, and that's where a lot of, to be honest, the equity issues surface, because, and goes to exactly what you said. At Digital Promise, we were super passionate about the digital use divide, and we came up with this concept of kind of powerful learning. And so that this isn't just about doing multiple choice questions on steroids, right? With more and more feedback on my multiple choice questions that are totally irrelevant to me, right? This is about actually changing what and how we learn, and making sure that's happening everywhere. And the sad part is you go to more underserved areas, and it is handed out as, here's how to do your worksheet even better. And then you go to more affluent areas, and they're learning to code, and they're building apps, and they're launching businesses, and they're, it's all these amazing things. And so I'll highlight what I see, and especially in this conference and many circles, and myself too, is like, we often really focus on solutions, right? What's the solution? What's the widget? And I'm working now with one of these fancy consulting businesses who works with many, many, many companies and organizations. And they have a pretty interesting framework where they say, actually, we have this thing we call the 10-20-70. 10% is algorithm, 20% is technology, 70% is organization, culture, people, and how you do that. And that's actually where you have to put the bulk of your effort. That's where your AI literacy, training your teachers, having administrators that understand, at least have an appropriate mental model for AI, and helping students and learners themselves have that mental model for like, oh, this is what it is, this is why it does this, this is how I can use it. And I think if we don't do that, we'll just fall back into optimizing towards the wrong goals, right? And I always say AI is so amazing at optimizing towards things. So what you point it to is actually really, really important in how that's framed. And that's what I think we have a lot of work to do, is to reimagine what we point these things towards and how we help our learners get there.
Just to comment on the kind of the 70% organizational back to changing the how we do things. The first step in changing how we do things, teaching and learning, is stopping to do what we are doing now. If you don't create time to do things differently, you will just keep doing things the same way. I take their example. I was talking to my wife. I like bringing it personal. I started a startup after running large teams at Microsoft for 20 years. And I'm using generative AI for every decision I make throughout the day, for every piece of design of the product, everything that we do. And my wife was asking me, are you just better at prompting? Like, do you know more about the tool? And it has nothing to do with that. Had I still been at Microsoft, I would have spent all my days in the same meetings, the review processes, filling out whatever reviews for employees, going to the process where we look at designs, and I would have maybe had half an hour at the end of the day to play around with the tools and try and see what they can go do. But I would have been doing my job the same way before. I stopped everything I did and created time to use the tools and find new ways to go do things. And being able to stop in the context of an education system is super hard. You're on a calendar and you're on a clock, and there's this material that needs to be taught by this date, and this assessment that needs to be happened by this date, and the semester is over and holidays are here. And stopping to create the time to go figure out how to do things differently is probably the hardest thing to go do.
And this brings me to something I'm going to say, but right before I ask them one more question, I do want to be able to begin to open it up to our audience. So if you have something, be ready with your question. We'll come right to you. One of the things that I think for me is so frightening, which I think echoes so much of what it is that you're all saying, is this time factor is leading a lot of people to say, well, you know what? These AI tools, and I think this is the thing that, from the iPad era, it just seems like we haven't learned yet, but it can generate this for the teacher faster. The teacher is so burnt out. They're so overwhelmed. They have so much going on. Let's just give them this win, and we'll figure it out from there. What is your response to that when you're saying, wait a minute, you need to make time. You're saying we can't, we need these resources. We have to think about equity. We have these different barriers around like, hey, look, people don't even have internet. We have so many other challenges to think about. We need to be able to begin figuring out assessment, and we don't want to do things the way we've always done them. What is the one step perhaps somebody can take when they are really overwhelmed and frustrated, but also really vulnerable to the marketing efforts of these generators?
I can take that. So I think the first question that comes to my mind when you ask that question is, though, how are we really envisioning the future of learning? And more than that, what's the difference between being like, am I learning something new, or I just want to be on a pathway to being a learned person? There's a huge difference between that. Learning versus learned. And how can we ensure that we are actually answering our questions in our mind? When we are vulnerable, ask that question to yourself. If you're a learner, because I am a lifelong learner myself, I would say that. I never stopped learning one day. If I did, then I would be like, oh, that's pretty much on my deathbed, right? So that's not happening now. But having said that, when you have that answer, I think whoever you represent, be it a parent, be it a classroom educator, be it an ed tech developer, be it a school district superintendent, or the learner himself or herself, make sure that will actually define your pathway moving forward and the decisions that you make, the choices that you make. Because yes, there will be a lot of intentionality in the choices that you make after you answer that questions within your heart. So that's how I feel.
Absolutely, we're all learners. I would love to open it up to the audience. If anybody has, yes, over here, please.
Is there a microphone, or shall I just use my voice?
I think you should be okay.
Okay. So my name is Vika. I'm from Norway, so we come from a bit different. You guys have different problems. Just a little background. I flunked math in high school. I'm a mathematician today. I've written 13 books on mathematics for level K-12. And this is kind of my big passion in life, basically accessing what you're doing. How can we teach as many people as possible? And I thought, in the middle, I don't remember your name, and it's far away there, so I haven't really match up. You said something really interesting to me. We are focusing on always the problem and not really discussing the issue. And what issue I really want to talk about is that if you look at the degrees of freedom of our students, if you're, 0 degrees of freedom, you need everything to be lined up. Do this, go there, fix that. And then you have people in this room who are like 3 degrees of freedom. It's like, just go build a house. You'll probably figure it out. You'll build a house. And then you have this contentment. And I feel that a lot of the things we're talking about is always thinking that because we want to be positive on the students' behalf, that they're all on 3 degrees of freedom. They can just take the house and run and build it, which they can't. Most people aren't there. So how do we sit down and solve a problem if we can't talk about that? Like, number 1, 2, 3, 4 said, I want to be a long life learner. But if you look out there, most people don't really care. They just want to learn enough to get a job, to hang with their family, play basketball or golf on the weekend, and watch the football on television. So the issue here isn't that we can't build the most phenomenal tech. I mean, go to housemath.com. I'll show you what I found. But it's all about how do we take people to figure out, I'm going to choose between learning today and I'm going to choose between watching the football game. I think I'm going to go for that learning thing. I think a lot of the issues are there, and how we can then use AI to get or foster and get these things. When we're talking about trying to change, when the radio came, we're going to put radios in all classrooms, get the best teachers, it's going to triumph it all, and of course nothing really happened. And every time something happens, it's going to be this big revolution. So how can we make that AI into reprogramming to actually solve for that and learn more people over the learning divide who want to be learners?
So I guess what you're saying is, like, how do we create be more of a purpose-driven environment within our spaces, both work spaces and, I think, for adults and for young people?
Well, I'll say that I think it's a challenge, right? Because the reality, and when we were talking about this, like equating this, you said other technologies, we've seen this before, the internet, we talked about this with the cloud, we talked about this when the calculator was brought into the class and now nobody's gonna know how to do math, right? Like, we've been there before. And I think the challenge is appropriate, or the notion of all of us being life learners is necessary, right? Because of the way in which things are changing and adjusting, because of how technology is advancing. I think the reality is not everyone will be, right? And I think that's what she's saying. So yes, there are things that we can do with technology and adjusting the way we learn and providing more experiential, opportunities for people to engage. We can look at different modalities with which people will learn and provide different assessment, but there will still be individuals that won't take this up, that won't make the adjustment, and I think that is just a reality, right, that exists. It's the same thing when we're talking about people adopting the cloud. There's some people that just, when we said you no longer have to manage a data center and your skills will go somewhere else, and they didn't want to make that adjustment, and so individuals were left behind. I think the challenge that we have is to present the technology in a way and look at and sort of pose the opportunities that are before us and talk about what is realistic in terms of the way in which we will work in the future to create the momentum, hopefully, that people will be driven towards.
And if I could add to that, I was going to say, I think one of the reasons, certainly to your point, not everybody is going to always be a lifelong learner, but I think one of the reasons someone is going to watch football, which I'm sure they still will, so will I, and hopefully also be a lifelong learner, I think is also in the ways in which we frame and discuss, right, what that content is, what that value is of what they're going to learn. And again, traditionally, we focused on very narrowed things. And if you think about, speaking of large-scale consulting firms, like the McKinsey had a research out there with the 56 foundational skills of the future of work. And I think a lot of people think, oh, if I'm going to be a lifelong learner, I have to learn AI, I have to learn robotics, I have to learn these very specific things because that's where we're going in the future. And I think when you reframe that as most of those skills that are listed in that study have nothing to do with being an AI expert, being a robotics expert. It's about critical thinking, it's about flexibility, it's about leadership, empathy, communication. And when you hear those things and how critical that they are, they're far less intimidating to think about if you're not an AI expert, if you're not a robotics expert, and they feel far more attainable to learn and grow. And I think as we think about utilizing AI's tools and software and how to encourage lifelong learning, it's also shifting the way we think about talking about that lifelong learning away from traditional knowledge to a broader set of proficiencies.
One of the worst things about education and the way we do things are 50-minute blocks. And we cut off the learning and we say, we're done, everybody. And unfortunately, we have come to time, which went by way too fast. I am so sorry, but I will invite you to continue the conversation outside. This was a very, very, very complex topic. Incredible group of people we get to spend hours with. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And we do invite you to step outside and continue the conversation with our panelists. Thank you.